All right, and we're ready to go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the sneak peek at our 2020 Intertribal Agricultural Council virtual conference track, Legal and Policy. My name is Desba Padilla, and I am a technical assistant specialist for the Southwest region. And I've got a couple of my colleagues here that are going to go ahead and introduce themselves as well before we get started here.
I'm Dan Cornelius. I'm also. Oh, Tikon, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tikon Galbraith. I'm the Technical Assistance Specialist up in the Alaska region. Happy to join you all today.
And I'm Dan Cornelius. I'm Technical Assistant Specialist for the Great Lakes region.
Aloha kaku, everyone. My name is Josiah Griffin. I'm Native Hawaiian, and I am a Program and Policy Specialist with the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at the University of Arkansas.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. Next slide, please. Okay, we are going to be having our virtual conference. It's the 2020 annual conference for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. It's scheduled for December 7th to the 10th, 2020. So we are going to have quite a few breakout sessions, and that is what we're going to be going over today and give you a preview of what's to come. Next slide, please. Okay. In the legal and policy topics, we are going to be developing an policy on farming, agriculture, and tribal food law updates. We will have a representative from the NAS National Office providing all the and information using NAS data. We should be having, we will have a presentation on the tribal conservation districts and policy advocacy, tribal government supported initiatives, an update on the Native Farm Bill 2017, as well as the 2023 as we move forward. Someone presenting or talking about the CDFI, agriculture diversification, basic business organization, and succession planning. And that's just an overview of all the different topics that we're bringing you today. Next slide. Okay, so one of the topics we're going to have is using NAS data. Like I said, we will have a presenter from the National NAS Office. Michelle Radis was invited, as well as Virginia Harris. So, we will have someone from the National NAS Office to do a presentation there in December. But what we are really looking at is a view of the 2018 tribal data, which is going to include some of the intertribal account survey data that Dan will be talking about a little bit after this slide is over. But we're going to be bringing down the breakdown of the census numbers, and also how to access the database. There's going to be a lot of new information and special tabulations on the new census database that they have up now on the USDA website. And we're also going to talk about some of the historic policy work and the historic data from 1975 forward. So a lot of information we'll be bringing from the the NAS office. So Dan, is there anything you want to talk about regarding the policy work by IAC? No? Okay. Well, we might have lost connection there real briefly, but we're going to go ahead and move on. Next slide, please. Okay, so we do have Tikon, one of my colleagues, and he'll be giving you a preview of the tribal conservation districts. So it's all yours, Tikon.
Great, thank you, Desba. So in Alaska, things are a little bit different. You know, rather than reservations, we had the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which created regional corporations and tribal corporations. And with that came the allocation of lands rather than reservations. So that has resulted in an effective approach to partnering with the USDA, which is the development of tribal conservation districts. As the largest private landholders in Alaska, the tribes have played a central role in helping NRCS and other USDA agencies accomplish their goals. So specifically, the partnerships with NRCS supports the conservation approaches. And we have been stewards of our land since time immemorial, and so it's a natural extension of the work and the perspective that we've applied to the lands over the years. So, what does that mean? We will really explore that in the breakout session during the conference. But any tribe could potentially develop or create a tribal conservation district. It takes a resolution of the board to enact, but once that has been accomplished and there's templates available to do that, once it's been accomplished, then you can start this conservation planning process with NRCS, and it opens up a bunch of resources available through NRCS as well as you enter into that process. So I think it's really exciting. Alaska has 18 different tribal conservation districts, and the way the work that they've done has varied specific to the region. Alaska is so diverse that what is the best practice and how to best manage the lands and what does that conservation plan look like varies and it's site specific, and that's true across the United States. So really understanding what's right for your land comes from our indigenous knowledge, and through forming a tribal conservation district, you are able to access the resources and different financial funding opportunities to really implement some of those projects that you might have on your reservation or in your community. So in Alaska, the tribal conservation districts have entered into co-management agreements with the state, developed farms, purchased building for storing food, and really pushed the food security and resilience of the communities across the state. I think with 18 in our state, we have at least half of what the tribal conservation districts that have been established nationwide. So it's a really good opportunity to consider, for your communities in the lower 48. Also in Alaska, the state is still wild enough and big enough that farming looks different and conservation looks different, and it often integrates the perspectives of subsistence and practicing our traditional ways of life. And so as we talk about tribal conservation districts, we'll also talk about some of the challenges and successes in the state of Alaska for utilization of these natural resources and integrating the salmon and moose and caribou into our diet, and how we've advocated for policy change and language updates to really allow us to access the programs in alignment with our understanding and the way in which things are being done here in Alaska. So I hope that you all are able to join for that breakout session and really do a deep dive with us and learn more about, what we've been able to accomplish here and how it might benefit your community and allow you to continue on that good path towards food security and resiliency through agriculture.
Great, thank you, T-Con. Next slide, please. Okay, next we got Electa Redcorn and Josiah Griffin, who are joining today. Electa, it's your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to have Josiah Griffin from the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative go over our first slide, which is a combination of tribal government supported initiatives, along with implementation considerations in food safety modernization and how those things go hand in hand in your planning and implementation. So Josiah, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you, Electa. So in working at the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, one of the kind of characteristics that we continue to see is that the COVID-19 crisis has not instigated new supply chain challenges, but really bubbled up existing challenges to the food supply chains that tribal and native communities see across the country. And so many tribes and tribal communities are taking up that gauntlet in a new and ever unique way to make sure that their people are fed by designing, implementing, and scaling both their growing agricultural operations as well as new food processing operations. So as you look at kind of moving forward in that space in a good way, how we talk about food safety has changed over the past few years. In 2011, Congress implemented or enacted what is called the Food Safety Modernization Act, with the authorization authority designated to the Food and Drug Administration under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And so in working through the Food Safety and Modernization Act, or FSMA for short, that was the first law of general applicability, which means that it applies kind of universally across the country to set to set food safety standards for the food supply chain. And that's anywhere from on-farm to market. And so as Electa said, in being compliant and in talking to FSMA, it's important to kind of address how the work that tribal communities and nations are doing is kind of moving forward, so that as we interact with our communities and as we interact with our regulators, we can be compliant with and kind of recognize what is otherwise required in this kind of broader national market. So with that, I will turn it over to Electa.
Thank you, Josiah. It's always wonderful to work with you. And I'm just going to share the final thoughts of a slide we had put together about FSMA in tribal oversight and enterprise management. I am a former IAC employee, and I went to work for my tribal nation at the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. And so it's a very important time to look to those policy and code and resources that are already built out, and then introduce them to your tribal council members, to your traditional leaders, to the youth in your community, so they understand that tribes can have a role in oversight and regulatory authority, and that tribal food codes and ag resource management plans can include FSMA provisions and other food safety considerations. A great example of this is we've hired a horticulturalist at the Pawnee Nation in response to our CARES food security concerns. And now it's up to the horticulturalist and myself to work with the Business Council to develop tribal-driven food safety standards for promoting food sovereignty initiatives. And it's all part of the learning curve as we learn how to stand in our power as tribal communities, tribal leaders, and as on-the-ground workers. So we invite you to join our discussion come December. We'll also be talking about enterprise operation activities. The operations should follow FSMA requirements and guidelines and may be required to do so if we meet or exceed sales thresholds, which we hope we will. And anyone who supports, staffs, or works in food production, packaging, transportation, processing, and or manufacturing must receive this type of training. Thank you, Josiah. And so these are just considerations if you are getting a division of ag off the ground, and things that we could all learn together and educate and inform our tribal leaders. So please join us for this conversation. Thank you, Desba. Thank you, Josiah.
You're welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Next slide, please. Okay, and now we do have a breakout session on the Native Farm Bill 2023, and I will hand this over to Dan.
So my internet is really spotty today. So my video, I just turned my video off, and hopefully my sound works for the next couple of minutes here. So in the 2018 Farm Bill, IAC helped to found and establish, along with Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative, Shakopee, Intertribal Timber Council, and others, the coalition. That Native Farm Bill coalition had brought tribes together and worked with tribal leaders on identifying what the priorities were, and then helping to really get everyone on the same page, up to speed, and ultimately resulting in a record number of tribal provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill. Right now is the time to start working for the 2022-23 Farm Bill and continue that progress. So the breakout session on the upcoming Farm Bill will be an effort to highlight what some of those priorities are, and really launch that effort to continue the progress that was done in 2018 and earlier Farm Bills.
Okay, next slide, please. Dan, you want to talk a little bit about the CDFI?
Yeah, so CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institution. And CDFIs are basically a community-oriented bank. Intertribal Ag Council had helped to fund Akitan, is a CDFI that is focused on food and agriculture issues. And the great thing with CDFIs is that they help fill gaps and voids where it may be difficult to access credit from a standard commercial bank, or there may be other issues of accessing funding, through USDA and other programs. So CDFIs help to play a role in making credit more available, as well as helping to provide the financial education and literacy that a lot of producers and youth need. So this panel and breakout on CDFIs will focus on agricultural diversification. We've got 4 bands community fund that will be sharing some of their, and then as well, and highlighting some of the great work that's been done in just the past 2-3 years, and looking at some of those success stories. So be a great opportunity to learn of how to access financing both through the CDFIs, and maybe how CDFIs can help to stand people up and put you in a position to be able to access other funding, whether through commercial lenders or USDA in the future.
Next slide, please. Okay,
and then yeah, I'll keep going on for our next breakout. We're going to be having 2 connected topics. Of the first is looking at the basic business organization, I know we've got over 79,000 Native American farmers, ranchers. We've got over 60,000 farms, and I couldn't tell you exactly how many are organized as an LLC or different types of corporations, but there's a lot of opportunity of thinking about how you structure and organize and incorporate your business in terms of protecting against liability, and then also looking at how can you maximize your tax benefits. And just on a reservation doesn't necessarily mean you're exempt from taxes. In some instances it does. It's complicated, but looking at how you effectively structure your business is really key to maximizing your profits and really ensuring the stability and the success of your operation, both for you and for passing it down to your kids and to your family. So looking at the basics of what are different types of business organizations, and then where do you go from there? Ultimately, and we'd recommend of working with an attorney at some point and accountants and thinking about the best course for your business. But this session will help to give you at least a basic overview of what are some of the considerations that you want to be thinking about, and what are some of the opportunities. Do you incorporate with your tribe if you can, or do you incorporate with the state? That's another big question. And so this panel also will be good for tribal leaders to be thinking about, if you don't have the ability for tribal entrepreneurs, business people on your reservation to incorporate with the tribe, what are some opportunities where might you look to be expanding out your legal infrastructure to allow that capacity right with your tribe, instead of making your businessmen go to a state for incorporation. This panel, this session, this breakout also is going to include succession planning. So same thing of, it's not just it's not just for yourself, but how do you pass your farm, your ranch, your business down to your kids, and really thinking now of what do you need to put in place to make sure that you have an effective transfer at some point in the future. That's another big area of need for a lot of our producers. So this breakout is going to be focusing on both of those topics, and with this session and with most of them, we're going to have time for questions and for discussion, and we're trying to make it as interactive as possible. And that session is going to be led for the succession planning. We've got Jim Wabanato from the Indian Land Tenure Foundation that is going to be taking the lead on that portion, and myself and a couple others are going to be taking the lead on the basic business organization.
Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. Okay, so Dan, if there's something you want to add, TCON, any of our guests, if there's anything you guys want to add before we close out the session today.
Well, I guess I'll just say that I've been going to the IAC meeting since 2010 was the first time that I had made it down, and kind of sad of not being able to go and just connect with everybody in person, but I'm excited. I think that coming together virtually, it's still great to see everyone's to see everyone's faces. As I say that, as I just turn off my video because my connection's unstable, but it still is a good opportunity to come together. I think that the virtual format, it makes it easier for more people to be able to come and to attend, and there's not the expense of the registration and travel. So we've got a lot of great topics, and excited to see you for both this track, and we've got a lot of other great content that's going to be part of the event as well.
Yeah, so it looks like that concludes our sneak peek at our 2020 Intertribal Ag Council virtual conference track on legal and policy. So we look forward to for you all to joining us at the virtual conference December 7th to the 10th. So registration is now open, so please do so at www.indianag.org. And thank you all.
Thanks, Tajba. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Mahalo.